Hello, my name is LoG, and today is going to be another video from the Patreon. On the Patreon, one of the main things I do is dive deep into each chord sound of the key. So I have a bunch of lessons on the 5 chord, on the 2 chord, the 4 chord, the 3 chord, every chord in the key. And one of the main things that I do is I write a small piece of music that features the sound of that chord. So that's what today's video is going to be. I wrote a short piece of music featuring the sound of the 3 chord, which of course is minor with flat 2. So if you enjoy this type of instructional material and this approach, feel free to check out the Patreon at the link above or below in the description. Let's break this tune up into 3 sections so I can show you exactly what's happening and exactly how we are featuring the flat 2. So this first section is more in the style of kind of older metal or old school metal like Pantera, Metallica, Slayer, bands like that for a variety of reasons. The main reason is the arrangement. A lot of those bands, they kept it a very simple, cut and dry, clean arrangement of just guitar, bass, drums, nothing else, right? It kind of puts more of the focus on the main riff that's happening and makes it almost sound like a little bit more kind of powerful or just cleaner, I suppose. And of course, if there are vocals are happening as well. This is different in comparison to a lot of modern metal that have very not overly done, but a lot larger of an arrangement. So you're going to hear added guitar parts, ambient guitar parts in the background. You're going to hear like synth, keyboards, all this stuff going on to kind of give it this like huge, like epic sound. This is not really, or those bands, old school Metallica, Pantera, etc. They didn't really do that. They kind of stuck to straight up guitar, bass, drums and kept it like that. So that's kind of the vibe of this first section, as well as the note material. So the main sound that we're targeting, I'm in drop D right now. So D is going to be my root, right? My main sound, and that's going to be the root of the 3 chord. This whole thing is written around D being a 3 chord. So that means we're in the key of B flat. It's not going to feel like B flat major at all because we never hit that chord. But we are really heavily emphasizing the D and playing around it like we're playing a 3 chord. So that's minor with flat 6 and flat 2. In particular, the flat 2. That's the color right here. So the first riff that I'm playing, that is a very typical sound of this old school metal as well. It's very scaly, right? Very scaly. I'm not doing like any wild jumps or any like kind of unpredictable movements. I'm kind of moving through a scale in a way that makes sense. Very scale-wise, very scaly, very much kind of like old classical music, if you think about it like that. A lot of those melodies and lines were very scaly. They weren't jumping around in kind of these unpredictable ways, whereas a lot of modern metal does do that. They'll jump around like do stuff like that, move around in ways that are not that predictable, which also sounds really cool too. They both sound cool, they're just very different. So yeah, the older style, very scale wise. So if you want to, write in that way, think more just scale wise, kind of like think about a line moving kind of gradually up and down instead of these like drastic up and down movements that a lot of modern metal has. And this exact scale run I'm doing right now starts on 5 of D minor. This is like left shape, 1, flat 3, 5. And I'm playing a little hammer and pull off to flat 6, using as a passing tone, right? Back to 5, then 4, flat 3, flat 2, 1, flat 7, flat 2. See that flat 2? That flat 2 is often happening kind of around the root. So I'm kind of dancing around this flat 2 and the root a lot. And I'm definitely doing that later on in the song, which is a very common sound. You're mostly playing root, which is D in this case, but you're once in a while sneaking in that flat 2. That's bringing out that very potent 3-chord sound. So that's that main part right there. And then the next part that I'm doing is kind of riding on this open D string, and I'm hammering on some notes up here, up an octave. What are the notes? Flat 2, flat 3, flat 2, flat 7, 1. Right? Again, just dancing around that 1 with the nearby flat 2. Also a little bit of that flat 3 to give it a little bit of a minor vibe. Flat 7 as well. This move right here, that's a really common like cluster of notes for a lot of metal. You play the note 1 fret up from the root, that flat 2 to give it that dark kind of evil sound, and then you play that flat 7 2 frets behind it. And I'm also doing a particular rhythm right here. I'm doing that sort of thing. I mean, I'm sure many of you can already tell this is a straight rip of a tune by Meshuggah called Bleed. That is literally the rhythm from that song. That's where I got it. All credit goes to that band. It's just a really fun kind of picking pattern that I like to play, so I figured I'd do it in here. So that's kind of what I'm doing right there. Every time I do this little flurry of quick up and down pick strokes, every time I do that, I'm doing one of these notes up top. So I'm kind of riding just up and down on the open D, like that, and then when I want to hit these notes, I'll throw in those quick little spurts of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Stuff like that. Sounds pretty cool. It's a fun technique to play, so that's why I'm doing it. But again, playing that flat 2, bringing out that dark, like I said, kind of evil quality. Then I play another little riff that's pretty similar, very scale-wise, again. Right? Very straightforward, just scale-wise, D as a 3-chord, 1, flat 2, flat 3, flat 2, 1, flat 7, walk back up to the flat 2, walk straight down the scale, 1, flat 7, flat 6, 5, 4, flat 3, 2, 1, just straight down the scale. Right? And I'm in drop D, so things do, of course, look a little bit different, but still just straight up scale material. Definitely featuring that flat 2. I'm making sure that every phrase I'm playing, every lead scale phrase that I'm playing, I'm hitting flat 2. I'm making sure of it because I want to bring out that sound. And the sound that you're hearing is it really kind of makes up a lot of those old school metal players. We're going to go through a lot of those actual songs that use this in a later video. But yeah, this is kind of how I'm approaching it. I'm playing scale fingers, making sure that I'm hitting that flat 2. I'm not skipping it, right? I'm hitting it pretty much every time that I can. So now, that's pretty much the first section. It kind of just repeats a couple little times. But later on in the second repetition, I start to add in a little bit of harmony during one of the licks. So there are 2 extra things going on right here that I want to talk about. The first thing is a harmony that happens every other time during this riff. So what this harmony is a very, very common one, especially for, again, older style metal, especially like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, bands like that. And what I'm doing is I'm harmonizing up a 5th, okay? So very simple concept. Look at the first note of your riff, in this case mine is D, go up a 5th, which would be A, up a power chord, right? And play the same figure or the same kind of shape and just abide by the key. So for example, if I play the first couple notes, I'm going to sing up a 5th. So my vocal is going to be harmonizing with my guitar. So watch this. That's my starting note. Bum, I'm singing up a 5th, and it will sound like this together. I'll play it slower. Bum, 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 bum. That sort of sound, right? So everything I was playing right there sounded like this. It kind of sounds like you're playing power chords when you do that, but you're just taking the two notes of the power chord and splitting it up between two different guitar players, which allows you to play a lot more technical passages because you can't, move your hand around super fast like a power chord or with a power chord. I'm sure some people can. I can't. So it's a very common sound. You hear that with a lot of like higher leads in some of these older bands. Really cool. And the other thing about it that's nice is that most of the shapes will be exactly the same. So for example, if I play those first couple notes, the first three notes of that passage, see what I'm doing right there? Up a half step, up a whole step. If I go up a fifth, it's probably going to be exactly the same. Here's my note, up a half step, up a whole step. And I'm still in the key. Why? Because most notes that you have in the key have a normal fifth right above, right? We can go back to when we were figuring out the chords. Nearly every chord has a normal fifth except for the 7. So as you're moving through notes, if you want to harmonize up a fifth, every time you do that, you're probably going to be playing the same figure because you don't have a bunch of different fifths. You don't have like flat fives over here and normal fives over here. You just have that one flat five to account for. Mostly everything is going to be exactly the same. So the licks will look uniform. That's why I can play this one right here, half step, whole step, and then it looks exactly the same when I do it up a fifth. Now, on the other side, if I try to harmonize with thirds, that's why thirds can get a little bit tricky because they are often different. As we know, if we go through all the chords in the key, every note there's a variety of threes, right? Some of them have flat threes, some of them are normal threes. So for example, if I try to harmonize this exact lick up a third, notice it doesn't look the same. Here I am, my original lick, half step, whole step. But now if I want to harmonize up a third, here's my note. I'm now going to play the lick right here. If I do the same thing, that's actually not correct because these two notes are not in the key, right? It needs to actually be this. See, I'm doing slightly different, whole step and then whole step, whereas the original was half step and whole step. That's why thirds can be a little bit tricky because they are not always going to be exactly the same, whereas fifths often will. That's why I think a lot of those older bands did that because they're just easier to harmonize fifths, right? And then the other thing that's going on right here that's during the second half of this moment, which you just heard, is I am incorporating a little bit of ambient guitar to kind of bring the part up just a little bit in dynamic, giving it this kind of background. And I'm playing simple notes, just kind of holding out, rung out notes like that, but I am featuring at one point this, right? So this is a very common figure that you'll hear a lot in modern metal. I'm playing the flat 2 and the 1 at the same time, which gives you that half step dissonance. I think I'm playing another note up there. Just a little melody in the background, but I'm making sure to bring out that half step between the flat 2 and the 1. A lot of people will just do that. They'll just do that or play them at the same time because they want that like super nasty, like I said, evil, whatever, brutal. A lot of people use that word. Whatever sound you want to, or whatever name you want to call that sound, that's how you can really address that sound by really featuring that flat 2 and the 1 at the same time. So yeah, then after that, getting into the second part, I do a variation on the main riff. There's our main riff. I'm now playing, I had to remember for a second. So the whole point of this is starting off the same, very similar, starting with that little figure, except I'm now moving down in a different position to eventually get me here, which is the first note of this next section. So this moment, of course, sounds pretty different and is more typical of a modern metal sound. So you notice a couple big differences. Number one, bigger arrangement. There's more going on. There's still, of course, guitar and drums and bass, of course, but there's also some synth background, some keyboards in the background. Now, not every band is going to sound exactly like this. This is just like my thing. This is the sound that I like. But a lot of bands will somehow add in extra kind of colorful, almost ambient layers. A lot of bands will do this with guitar, whatever. There's a lot of ways you can do it. But what it does is it just elevates the arrangement, makes it sound huge, gives it this like epic sound. That's the first element. And the other element that is very typical of modern metal is featuring chords that are not necessarily like these evil metal chords, right? What is this chord that I'm playing right off the bat. So if D is our 3 chord, that's the main sound that we're kind of playing this whole time. I'm now playing this. What is that? That is now my root, right? I'm really sitting on this note. That's E flat. Again, I'm in drop D, so that would be E flat. What is that? That is the 4 of the key, right? If you're playing a 3 chord, D minor, go up a fret, you're now playing 4. So 4, as we know, it is not an evil sounding chord at all. It's one of the prettiest, most lush major chords that we can play. It has this like really effective sound if you're going for that. This is not something that older metal would do. Older metal kind of really stuck, not all the time, of course, but most of the time, they really stuck to that like raw energy, like aggressive, brutal, evil type sound, right? They didn't really play this type of harmony. Yet modern metal does it all the time, and they make it really stand out by throwing on a bunch of extra notes in the background to fill out the chord voicings, like I said earlier, with synth, keyboards, ambient guitar. I've got a little melody going on in the background, but that is a very typical sound of modern metal. So, and I'm also later on going to another chord that's very common, which I'll talk about in a second. So also what I'm doing here in the rhythm is I'm literally just playing the simplest notes of the 4 chord that you can think of. I'm just using a rhythm, that same sort of rhythm that I talked about earlier, where it's that bleed rhythm by Meshuggah, that I'm just doing a particular rhythm, but the notes that I'm playing are hilariously simple. I'm starting on the 1. This is 1 now. We'll think about that as our chord. I'm then going, let's see if I remember the rhythm. Something like that. I'm literally playing 1, 3, 5. Like I'm playing the simplest. It sounds like I'm going like this. That's what I'm doing in the bass. But of course, on top, I've got a bunch of notes playing like, I've got sharp 4 going on in there, which of course is the color note of a 4 chord, so I can do that. I've got other notes, 7s, I'm sure, happening somewhere. But I am just spelling out those notes in the chord. And once in a while, I do this as well. Play that open D, right? Just to bring your ears back to the E flat, but that's the E flat 7. I also play that note up top as well, because that is, of course, the 7 of the chord. So just spelling out the chord a little bit. Then later on, I come back and I repeat the rhythm now on a different chord. I play this. This is a 2 chord, okay? So where's the root here? That is actually the root, C right there. So again, if D is 3, E flat is 4, there or there. Here's D 3, C is 2, right? And I'm doing a very similar thing. Just moving around the 2, like just playing simple notes. That's like 1, 2, 4, flat 3, just really simple notes. I'm really trying to feature that too, because again, it's a nice kind of colorful sound. It's one of my favorite chords. The synth in the background is also shifting to kind of feature the 2 chords, so playing some of those notes in the melody as well as the chord voicings. And I also wanted to do this because this is the same progression or same idea as I did in the last lesson. If you remember that last lesson, we were talking about more of a lead context, and I put together like a hip hop track. And what was the chord progression in there? 3 was the main chord, but then we also had a 4 and a 2. I'm doing the same thing right here. So wildly different sound, wildly different genre, but if you know this material and you know the sounds that are available, you can make it work in whatever genre you want, right? That one was a hip hop track. This is a metal track using the same harmony, literally the same concepts, just using the stylistic choices and idioms of the genre to make it work. So that's the main thing going on right there. And I'm just kind of moving through, testing out some rhythms. I have some accents, kind of big notes, kind of hitting notes like that, just because they sound kind of cool. Also, another thing that metal does a lot is when they accent a single note, like let a note ring out, they'll do a little bend on it to give it that extra kind of odd whatever sound. It's a cool sound that is pretty fun to play. So yeah, that's pretty much that moment. Let's see. Yeah, and like I said, that rhythm is going on that whole time. I'm kind of just accenting those real quick double down ups whenever I'm moving to notes, just to, again, create a pretty unique sound. But again, this is a better example of kind of modern metal, where part 1 was more of the traditional old school. This is a definitely more modern sound, in particular because of the harmony that's happening. More pretty sounds, right? Kind of bigger, more epic, emotional sounds, if you want to call it that. Whereas most old school metal doesn't really dip into that. They really stick to just that core kind of rock, flat 2, etc. So now let's move on to the final section and see what we got going on. This section starts with a riff that is a play on the original intro riff, which sounded like this. This one is a similar kind of figure, except I'm starting here on D, and it sounds like this. Okay, so again, moving a little quick, like hammer-on pull-off. In this case, I'm doing a slide, and I'm just walking down the scale, right? And then when I get here, I play a little chord. So that's, again, what scale, what sound am I using? D as a 3 chord, so D minor, flat 6, flat 2. That's what I'm playing. And I'm playing very scale-wise. I'm not doing crazy jumps. I'm just kind of moving around. A little bit of palm muting here, some more sliding, more kind of legato sounding. But yeah, very similar to the first one. I end with this chord. That's actually a major 7 built on the 4 chord. And I'm doing that to just kind of like, just this extra color coming out of nowhere, which I kind of like. And again, what am I doing when I play that? Featuring this flat 2, right? Because I'm about to play this. I'm about to play that. That's D. I'm about to hit that, but right before you hear it, you're hearing this. Right? It really, even though this chord by itself is funny, this is the 4 chord, okay? If I play the 4 chord just by itself, it's actually very pretty. Right? And play another version. Turn on my distortion. Right? Isn't that a pretty chord? But on the other side, if I constantly play that D right here, especially in the lower register, it sounds not pretty. It's like very kind of intense. Right? So it's an interesting little tool that you can use. After that, I then start essentially the same riff 4 times in a row, and each time I am upping the dynamic. So I'm doing something to bring up dynamic, to kind of bring up the energy of the tune. The first one, and also every single riff that I'm playing is based on 1 and flat 2, and that is it, right? So I'm just pretty much doing this. Here's the first one. Notice what am I doing right there? Flat 2, 1, flat 2, 1, or yeah, flat 2, 1, flat 2, 1, over and over again. Doing a lot of like hammer-ons and pull-offs, little kind of technical things, palm muting pretty much everything. Got some ghost notes in there. Notes that aren't really anything, right? Just kind of sound. Once in a while, I'll go, I think, let's see. Yeah, do a little bam, like that kind of rhythm. Just for variation, just because it's fun. And then I do a little riff to kind of signify the end of it. And that riff is, let's see if I remember. Yeah. So it's just a riff that feels cool, that sounds cool. Kind of a play sort of on this, right? Because if you listen to the first couple notes, that's actually the same thing. D, E flat, F, D, E flat, F. I'm just doing the D and the E down an octave. So a little play on that. And then I'll hit this D right here. Again, that little mini bend. Right back to the low D, starts the next phrase. The next phrase is the same riff, but now instead of palm muting everything, I'm now playing the notes open and having some hard silence in between. And I'm doing some palm mutes whenever I'm playing those open strings. Same riff though, same ending kind of phrase ending lick as well. Same exact thing. Next one, same idea. I just move that flat 2 up an octave to the flat 2 right here. Just, right, that's the open string. That's the flat 2. Right, and I'm also sneaking another little note on the D string just for fun. I'm playing during the moments that were silenced before. During those silent moments, I'm now sneaking in a little whatever. Just playing a note, pulling off the D string just because it's fun. Right? And then I also have a harmony going on. The other guitar on the right channel is playing this. So I'm playing this in the left channel, and then the harmony on the right channel is playing that. So, etc. Same riff down here to get into the next section. Final section, the biggest moment, still up here, flat 2, open string. Except I'm playing this chord during the silence, and this chord I just kind of stumbled across. It's pretty cool. So it's like C, D, open, G, D. So there's a lot of D in here, but there's also C, which is kind of cool. So really cool sound that I was a fan of when I stumbled across it. So that's probably the biggest sounding one, like the most high energy. So that one's at the end. But that whole moment, we're just kind of building dynamic the whole time. Also, arrangement-wise, there's another thing going on. The arrangement is also building as well. Each repetition, more things are being added, whether it's like background chords or ambience or a melody. Things are always being added. But the melody that's happening is, I think, pretty significant because it really features the flat to it. It kind of creates this very eerie vibe, especially when the riff is going just flat 2-1 all the time. Another thing that, well, let me talk about the melody first and I'll talk about the rhythm. So my melody, if I remember it, is 1, flat 6, 5, 1. So, and then flat 3, flat 2, flat 6, flat 2. So I'm actually playing like a power chord of the flat 2 chord, aka the 4 chord of the key. So that's such a common figure for this kind of eerie sound, especially the beginning. 1, flat 6, 5, 1. How many times have you heard that? It sounds like a horror movie or something. That's so popular, especially when you're playing 3-chord, because then you can make it even extra eerie by playing that flat 2, right? So that's what's going on in that melody, and I'm slowly adding to that melody as time goes on. I might start off with one little kind of synth patch playing it, then another one will come in, then another one will come in, just to really bring out that sound, constantly building up the dynamic. Another thing that's interesting, I was going to talk about it earlier, is the rhythm that's happening. I'm not going to get into like the hard details of the rhythm, but the rhythm is very syncopated, right? It's not like super predictable or on time all the time. It's not that crazy. There are way crazier rhythms out there, but if you listen to it, it doesn't feel like it's 100% in 4/4. It's obviously not that complex. But the interesting thing is when this riff is going on, which is kind of doing its own time, the rest of the song is playing 4. So that melody is blatant 4/4. So you'll notice the melody will start over and the riff won't be starting over. It'll be somewhere else. I've talked about this before on a previous video I've done on the Patreon. I also have a power-up that talks about this exact thing. If you're interested, I can let you know. But that's what's going on right there. It's a cool sound, very, very simple riff. This is a lot more typical of kind of the modern metal, a little bit more like hardcore, like mainstream sort of metal. Not the prog world gets a lot crazier than just that, but a lot of these kind of more modern mainstream rock/metal bands will do a riff like that. And then to finish it off, I just do another little scale run that's very similar to what we've been doing. I end on that chord that I was playing earlier. This one is actually a combination of both riffs from the first part of the song. So if you remember this one, excuse me, remember that one? That's sort of what I'm doing here, not 100%, right? Kind of a play on it. Then when I get here, that's actually literally the first riff. I'm just playing it right here. It's just a little combination lick. And they do a little rhythmic thing again and then hit that chord. So that's pretty much it. So you can see what's going on here. A lot of these stylistic things of metal, a lot of the palm muting, quick little palm muting things, a lot of open string, especially the open low string, the D, hammering on, pulling off the notes. But the main note that I'm really playing quite a bit here is that flat 2, right? I want to bring out that sound because that sound just makes the 3-chord what it is, right? It can really transform the sound into something that is totally different, not really major, not really minor, even though the sound is minor. It's its own thing when you start featuring that flat 2. So experiment with this stuff. You can get a lot of mileage out of it. Of course, the only problem with this genre, the musical material is pretty simple when you break it down. It's just technically pretty demanding. You have to have a certain level of technique to play this stuff properly. But the great thing about that is it just takes time. You just have to practice all the time, work on your technique, build it up. And of course, we're going to talk more about technique down the road. But yeah, that's the sound. I'll wrap up this video with one more playthrough. If you're curious, you can kind of think about all the things that I was talking about, and I'll see you guys in the next one.